Good evening and welcome to Two Way Tonight. I'm Mark Halperin, just off a plane, a little bit sweaty, needing a Diet Coke, and eager to talk to you. Thank you for joining. As always, this program is about two-way communication, unlike most programs, so we're going to welcome your participation. Tonight's program is going to be a little different than some of you are used to in some respects, but peace, love, and understanding will continue to be the ethos with which we engage, extending the presumption of grace to all. And I spent a lot of my day on a flight, and I tweeted more than I usually do. And I engaged on a topic having to do that some of you will be extremely familiar with and some of you won't be, so I'm going to have to introduce it from scratch. This question of the government buying something called Politico Pro. So we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. For those of you interested in media stories and in the way MAGA uses hatred for the media to gin up public opinion, you'll like tonight's broadcast episode because we're going to talk about that. So that'll be part of the program after I run through the headlines and some analysis of the headlines. And then James McGuire is here. James McGuire is an expert on AI, and he and I are going to talk about AI, and you're going to find that really interesting too. And we'll take your questions. So headlines, I'm going to talk about Politico Pro. Take your questions about Politico Pro. So there are already some hands up. Put your hand down unless you want to talk about Politico Pro for now. Okay, so if your hand's up and you want to talk about Politico Pro, leave it up. If not, take it down. If you're listening and your hand's not up and you want to talk about Politico Pro, raise it. And some of you don't have your hand up now, but after I talk about it, it's going to incite you to want to talk about it. So be listening closely, get ready to talk about Politico Pro. Then James McGuire and I will talk a little bit, and then we'll talk about AI, and you can ask questions about that or anything you want at that point. Okay, here we go. Today, on the biggest story of yesterday, the Gaza story, people are interpreting the White House press secretary's comments as walking back what the president said yesterday regarding troops, regarding forcing people to leave Gaza, regarding owning Gaza. I don't look at it as a walk back because he spoke a little bit imprecisely yesterday, but it's all the same. He's trying to convince people that he's got a plan, and if they have a different plan, they can offer a different plan. And I think if you take his words literally and her words literally, it's really no different. Will he put troops in the ground? All she kept saying at the briefing today, he hasn't committed to putting troops in the ground. I doubt he ever would. MAGA continues to not love this, at least parts of MAGA, and it's an interesting and evolving story. The tale will be told in part by the series of bilateral meetings he has coming up as Middle Eastern leaders follow Netanyahu to the White House. So we'll talk more about that, but you'll see lots of stories, I think, out there saying it was all walked back. It was like the season on Dallas with Bobby Ewing's dream. No, it's pretty much where it was yesterday. Protests today around the country against President Trump. The resistance is starting to resist a little bit more. Washington's still getting its act together, but around the country, people are getting more engaged. Let's play that, please. Number one.
If you have a judgment, please don't be incited under the drug.
Fuck Donald Trump! Fuck Donald Trump! Fuck Donald Trump! Fuck Donald Trump!
Elon Musk bullshit, whatever, from taking away my boyfriend's fucking rights.
Deport Musk! Deport Musk! Deport Musk!
I'm Gavin Nguyen, and I'm reporting right now here in Palm Desert along Fred Waring Drive, just near the Civic Center, and there are hundreds of people right now protesting against President Donald Trump's policies.
Deny, defend, oppose! Deny, defend, oppose! Deny, defend, oppose! Deny, defend.
So 6 different cities. Some people in the chat. Again, I never read the chat, but sometimes I notice it. Yeah, hundreds of people is not thousands or tens of thousands, but it is a sign of resistance, and there's going to be more of it. I think some of you know before the election, I predicted the largest mental health crisis in American history if Donald Trump won. I had a incredible exchange with a doctor today who may come on the show later in the week, who talked about his experience with his patients, and it's quite something. Very vivid, and he describes just how upset some people are at the results of the election. So we'll probably talk more about that. One issue the president dealt with today at the White House was this executive order on women's sports. And it's quite something as a photo op. I heard some people on the right say it was the best photo op he's had in the presidency so far. Let's play number 4, please.
You know, if you'd like to gather around me, I think I'm going to be okay. Come on. Come on. Secret Service is worried about them? If we have to worry about them, we have big problems. Okay, do you want to do this? Watch what I do, and then I'm going to give you some pens, okay? You ready? What a nice picture this is, huh, Governor? You ready? We'll do a good job. Wait, let me press that. I want to make this a really good signature, because this is, this is a big one, right? Oh, I think we have a 10. We have a 10.
God bless you, Mr. President.
So whatever you think of the issue here, I don't think you can deny that's a pretty extraordinary photo op. I don't remember one quite like that.
Events, right?
The president and his press secretary engaged on this, eager to not only use the power he has with the executive order to try to keep trans athletes out of women's sports, but also he's going to try to keep either through action or through jawboning trans athletes out of the Olympics when they're played in the United States, out of the World Cup. It's going to be an ongoing issue, and it's an issue that Democrats still haven't figured out how they want to talk about. All right. I think that's it for news. Now, let me start from scratch on Politico Pro. This is an important story because it implicates media bias. It implicates DOGE. It implicates the war to define the daily back and forth, which the right, as we saw during the campaign right now, seems to be better at, despite the liberal bias, the anti-Republican bias of what I call the dominant media. Despite that, these new media organizations and entities and entrepreneurs and Twitter have equalized things a little bit, and maybe even given an advantage to the right after dealing with the deficit for a long time because of the bias and the dominant media. There's a thing called Politico Pro. Most of you have never touched that product because it's very expensive. It's a B2B product, a business-to-business product. The name Politico Pro, I believe, was first suggested to Politico by me when I had a job interview there years ago, and I wanted to propose a suite of services to them. And I said, we'll call it Politico Pro. They swiped that from me. They never gave me a penny, but I'm sure they thought of it on their own. They forgot I suggested it. Politico Pro is something that's purchased by lobbyists and businesses and the government, and it's proprietary data. It's data that it's some publicly available data that they aggregate, but it's also reporting and other information that in theory is not available anywhere else. Now, when I was a young journalist, there was something called National Journal. National Journal was a monthly magazine, maybe it was twice a month, I don't remember. Pretty thick. It had 3 hole punches in it, so you could store it in a 3-ring binder. And it was extraordinarily well-written articles about public policy, and it cost a fortune. I don't remember how much it cost, but it cost way more than like Time Magazine or Newsweek. But if you were a Washington office, a House or Senate, White House, department, agency, lobbyist, you had to get it, even though people almost never read it, right? Politico Pro is somewhat similar in the sense that it's like a Bloomberg terminal if you're in finance, right? If you're in government, either in the government or in a lobbying firm or a DC law firm, whatever it is, you budget to get Politico Pro. Because if there's one piece of information in there that helps you during the year, particularly if you're a lobbyist, it's worth the price, right? You tell your client, do this, they do it, they make $1 quadrillion, or they avoid losing $1 quadrillion. And like, thank God we have Politico Pro. To be honest, I don't know everything that's in it. I don't know exactly how many different Politico Pro products there are. I just know it's a B2B product and it's very expensive. Okay. Governments, state, local, federal, they have big budgets for publications. As I tweeted earlier today, if I were the head of the CIA and my station chief in Athens said, should I have a New York Times subscription? I would say, yeah, you need to access New York Times because they often know stuff the government doesn't know. So yeah, either use your cousin's login or don't break the law, you're in the government. Let's buy it, okay? Just like in the private sector, I'm sure a lot of you have offices that have budgets for certain things like periodicals. When I worked at ABC News, we would get stacks and stacks of hard copy newspapers in the pre-internet age, and many of them would go unread, but we paid for them. And then at some point, ABC was like, we need to cut back. Let's scrutinize this. Maybe we don't need 100 Washington Posts delivered every day. Okay. Politico Pro provides some amount of the revenue to Politico. I don't know how much, but some. And it's very expensive. Politico's free, right? You can read all the Politico journalism you want, but Politico Pro costs money. Okay. Today, it was reported that yesterday and today, that some amount of money, and I've seen different accounts, but millions are spent by the federal government on Politico Pro. Okay. And that some of that money was paid for by USAID. Okay. And the controversy is, why are they spending all this money on Politico? Okay. Now, as I tweeted before, there's a supply side issue and a demand side issue. Is this a scandal about Politico, or is it a scandal about the government? Okay. Let's play Caroline Levitt today at the White House, number 5, please, talking about canceling Politico Pro subscriptions.
Upon coming out here to the briefing room, I was made aware of the funding from USAID to media outlets, including Politico, who I know has a seat in this room. And I can confirm that the more than $8 million taxpayer dollars that have gone to essentially subsidizing subscriptions to Politico on the American taxpayers' dime will no longer be happening. The DOGE team is working on canceling those payments now. Again, this is a whole of government effort to ensure that we are going line by line when it comes to the federal government's books. And this president and his team are making decisions across the board on, do these receipts serve the interests of the American people? Is this a good use of the American taxpayers' money? If it is not, that funding will no longer be sent abroad, and American taxpayers will see significant savings because of that effort.
Okay, so the government spends money on all sorts of things, including information. And that's what we're talking about here. Talking about an information product. The Treasury Secretary has a Bloomberg terminal in his or her office. That costs a lot of money. I don't think there's anybody who would say the Treasury Secretary shouldn't have a Bloomberg terminal. That's a good use of our tax money. Because to be in finance, to be understanding what's going on with world markets, you have to have a Bloomberg terminal. I think, what do they cost now? $30,000 a year or something. So it's not a question of should the government ever pay for information from news organizations, because they do. As I said, I think the Athens bureau chief should have an nytimes.com subscription. So there's a threshold question here. Is Politico Pro worth the money? That judgment was made by someone at USAID and all the other federal departments that subscribe to it. They said, yes, we need that. That might have been a bad judgment. And it's not, I don't think it's blanket. I don't think it's either good or bad for every department. You could say the Secretary of Agriculture needs it, but the FBI doesn't, whatever. Okay. That's on the government side. On the Politico side, the right has turned this into, they're subsidizing Politico. Well, in a sense they are. They're paying Politico money, but they're paying for they're paying for an information product. They're not doing it to bribe Politico. Okay. Now, is Politico liberally biased? I think their coverage of Biden and Trump in the last 4 years has become increasingly biased. And there are reporters there, some of whom have left, who agree with me. But they're not biased because they make money off Politico Pro. Most of the reporters who work for Politico have no knowledge about the business side. There's a sales team at Politico that successfully has sold the product, okay, to them, to the different parts of the government. I cannot blame Politico for this. They're not doing it for any reason, but they're trying to make money because they're a business. So Politico is blameless, despite what you'll read on the right. And again, I've been attacked all day for saying this. I don't care on this one. I'm happy to be attacked because it's so important that the truth be told about this. Politico Pro has a sales team, and they sell their product, and they set a very high price point. And if the government doesn't want to pay for the price they're doing, and they can't negotiate a better rate, then I know they don't get it. But they made the judgment they need it. Now, on the demand side, I agree with Elon Musk. Scrutinize it. Do they really need it at that high price point? Because it's millions of dollars of tax money. All right, here's a tweet, number 6, please. This is a representative of a lot of tweets from Red Twitter today about this. Blaming Politico rather than blaming. All right, it's a little hard to read. I can't read that. Can you blow that up? I can't read. Anyway.
The Politico scandal is worse than you think.
Thank you. Yeah, keep going.
It's not just the 15 million that Politico received from USAID, it's 34.3 million that Politico has received from various federal government agencies. Politico is without doubt a totally corrupt propaganda arm of the swamp.
Right. So the first part's true. A lot of money, and it should be scrutinized. And I can see the arguments for them to say Politico is biased, as a lot of Washington news organizations are, against Republicans, but they're not connected. They're not biased because they're making the money off this product. Okay. So again, people have been tweeting at me all day saying I'm part of this thing and I'm an apologist for this and it's totally corrupt. Here's something that's true. In Washington, the people who work on the Politico sales team and who write for Politico and Politico Pro, they're more likely to be liberal Democrats than they are Republicans. That's true. They're more likely to be at parties with people in the Biden administration and the Trump administration. Not 100%, but that's true. But I'll say again, you can go on Twitter and read about this and hear about it on podcasts, etc. The supply side, there's not a problem. They're selling a really expensive product, and the sales team's getting some people to buy it. On the demand side, again, someone should make the judgment. And if you're a good boss and whatever your job is in the federal government, if you're a good steward of the taxpayers' money, every year you're saying, you know what, we've got a $30 million budget for subscriptions. And maybe we shouldn't spend it all. Maybe we should give some of it back. That's not what bureaucrats normally do, but we're paying $1 million a year for Politico Pro. Who's using it? How useful is it? Can we get the same information for a cheaper price? Can we negotiate with Politico to say, hey, the government's buying a lot of subscriptions to Politico Pro. Can we get a lower price? All that should be happening. But just because it's a big number and just because people don't necessarily understand what's in it, doesn't mean it's a waste of taxpayers' money. Just as the Bloomberg terminal that costs tens of thousands of dollars is not a waste of taxpayers' money. I don't know enough about what they're getting in Politico Pro, but I can tell you it's wrong to say this is a scandal about Politico, and it's wrong to say it's absolutely a wasteful expense. Because the people who are saying that have no idea, because they've not interviewed the people who decided to buy it and the people in the government who use it. Okay? Dan Turrentine is here. Dan, come on in and tell me if I've missed anything about this. Because as you can see, I'm both fired up and tired both. Have I missed anything? Have I gotten anything wrong from your point of view?
No, I know Politico Pro very well because when I ran government relations for a Fortune 500 company, we used it.
What's in there? What's in there?
Yeah, so I mean, look, I ran it for H&R Block. We were very interested in their financial services vertical and their tax vertical. What they do is they are very, very well connected to the specific committees of jurisdiction. The members of the jurisdiction, their staff leak to Politico. Often the minority on Capitol Hill does not know what's happening from the majority. They'll find out in Politico Pro. A lot of CEOs and CFOs and other senior executives in companies read Politico Pro. And so they are very, very, they're focused like a laser beam on very specific things. They're very well connected. People advertise in there when they're trying to get in front of certain eyeballs. And so, look, it just, as you say, the Bloomberg terminal for Wall Street is the great, kind of symbol. Punch Bowl now is also very involved, right. Specific, just to Capitol Hill. And as you say, the roll call national journals of the world, for those who remember them 20, 30 years ago, were fairly similar. But to say that it is a partisan, witch hunt against Republicans is ludicrous on the Politico Pro side. They just report on the legislation and regulations.
Hold on. I got a couple questions for you. I just saw somebody put in the chat that says Dan and I are shilling for Politico Pro. I'm going to do my best to extend the presumption of grace in responding to you. No. And I want to say something stronger to you. No, we're not shilling. You should be delighted that we're for free giving you some content here, telling you the truth about this. We're not shilling for them. We're telling you the truth about this. Now, Dan, there's a lot of deep reporting. So if you read a normal Politico story, they're not going to drill down to like the motion to recommit and all the procedural stuff. Is there proprietary data in there or aggregated data, or is it just stories?
It's just stories. So
Yeah.
they will say, like, sometimes they'll say they'll break a story because they publish at a specific time, usually like 5:30 in the morning, 6 in the morning, like tip sheets. And then they'll do news alerts throughout the day. So they'll say, here are the witnesses, or a member of Congress is going to hold a hearing in 2 weeks. Here are the witnesses. Here is what they're going to focus on. A lot of lobbyists don't know about it. A lot of lobbyists cut and paste and send it off to headquarters to say, this is coming. So their secret sauce, like a lot of people, is they're well connected.
Right. So Axie or Punchbowl, a newer product, they have a pro product too. They have a free product and a pro product. So somebody might say, we don't need to pay for Politico Pro anymore because we're getting the same thing from Punchbowl. But if you're a lobbyist or you're on the Hill, you can't afford to pick and choose because you know your rivals have it. So you can't not get it. And the executive branch has to get it because if you're in the legislative affairs department of your agency or department, if you are in the comms department or at a senior level, you have to know what the lobbyists and the people on the Hill know. You don't have an option.
They also cover the executive branch. They'll cover Treasury. They'll cover DOD. Like they have an agriculture vertical, defense vertical, healthcare, but like all the places people have vested interest.
Right. So it would be like telling a Hollywood agent at CAA, you can't get variety. It's too expensive. We got to cut variety. They have to get the trades. It's like the insider trades. Okay. Dan, thank you for that. Stay with us while we take questions. So if you want to ask questions about this, raise your hand. I'll say again, I'm not saying that DOGE shouldn't scrutinize this. I guarantee you, if they put me in charge of going in to the agriculture department and said, figure out if we're overpaying for content, I'd say, show me it. And I'd say, you're getting 100 hard copies of the Washington Post? No. Let's negotiate one digital subscription. You don't need to read the hard copy. You want the hard copy, buy it yourself. That's what I would do. And Politico Pro, I would say, how much are we spending on Politico Pro? Who's using it? You know, and then decide whether to keep it or not. But I'll say again, this has nothing to do with the bias of Politico. This has nothing to do with Politico being corrupt. Kudos to them. They make millions selling this thing because they figured out how to package up information that lobbyists, people on the Hill, CEOs, other journalists, and the executive branch have to have. Okay? Here we go. Bring folks in. Tom, come on in. Tell folks what connection, if any, you have to this industry.
Absolutely none. We talked last night.
Yes, sir. I know. I'm bringing you back. What would you like to ask about Politico Pro?
Yeah, I think I kind of wonder if there might be a little timing with the story that came out last week.
Yeah, but you
go ahead.
Yeah, with the story that came out last week with, I think Mark Caputo was mentioned in that, where the senior editors at Politico kind of quashed some less than favorable stories about Biden, and then people are seeing the money spent on Politico and kind of trying to put 2 + 2 = 5 together and say, okay, well, all this money was spent, and then you got Politico was quashing negative stories about Biden.
Dan,
it's a leap, but you know.
Yeah, I think there's. I didn't think of that kind of maybe being a tipping point for some people to go poke around, but I mean, certainly Politico wasn't the only news organization that was doing that.
True.
And again, I think it's almost like you would want to separate the two houses. Politico.com has more. It's more like the New York Times or even a Times on page 6. Like it's a little more gossipy and like the polls and what's up, what's down. The pro side is really tailored for inside the Beltway, like practitioners on specific issues. And so I think, you know, as Mark said, they make a lot of money off pro. A lot of the advertising is done because companies want to get in front of those people. But then the free side of it is more like the gossip and, you know, it may be that was a tipping
I think they just see Politico.
Yep.
Yep. Tom, thank you. Okay, let's Bill Brandt, come on in. Question about this.
Hello, everyone. This is Bill Brandt in South Lake. Thanks for having me back, Mark.
Yes,
first thing I just want to say, your episode last night, I'm pretty sure it was last night on the diner, maybe it was day before yesterday, about Greenland was King Kong awesome. Just
thank you, sir.
Awesome. And the beautiful use of this of your skills and this technology. With respect to the Politico Pro story, I'm a judge in my regular life, and I'm a retired military officer, and I'm used to dealing with great people who are have average intellects, and they're what the phrase of the insiders call everyday people. Okay. And the law, which I'm an attorney, it's kind of a blunt instrument. It's not a fine tune. We're going to figure out which grain of sand goes on this side of the scale and makes it right. And because of these things, people make judgments based on the face value of things. And the face value and the details matter. The amount of money spent matters. And we don't know what that is. And exactly who's getting these subscriptions, we don't know whose that is. But it looks, just from a blunt instrument standpoint, if you kind of have an impression that the media is biased, and then you get a story that they're getting 2 million, 4 million, 8 million, 30 million. Once again, the specifics matter, and who's getting a subscription matters. But USAID is supposed to be working on international things, okay? And maybe they need all that stuff to get a good pulse on international things. But it seems to me that every congressman might want to have this. That seems reasonable. If you're a lobbyist, you might want to have this. How many subscriptions does USAID need? That's I'm saying it looks bad. It smells bad.
Dan, explain why USAID might need Politico Pro.
Yeah, so whoever has oversight over USAID in Congress, whether it's appropriations or hearings, they would want to know what they're thinking, what they're working on, how they are looking at issues, because that's, you want to know your banker if you're doing getting money from somewhere. So they would want to know exactly what is going on. Politico Pro also has international and actually in state capital subscriptions, Austin, Albany, Brussels, because the EU is very active and stuff. So where in the Politico Pro family they would have subscriptions, Politico Pro also gives a discount. The more number of subscribers you have, the less each subscriber is paying. It's stacked. So I think I saw they were paying 18,000 USAID. I think that was right, or 20,000 out of the 8 million in the federal government. So based on when I was there 5 years ago, that'd be about 10 people in all of USAID would have those subscriptions on an annual basis.
And that could be
again, you may say that they shouldn't, but by DC standards, that's pretty tiny.
That could be.
I understand. The details matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course they do. Of course they do. But just hypothetically, Bill, there's a legislative affairs office in USAID. They need to deal with the committees, as Dan said, that has oversight over them. They need the ability to know what's going on, what hearings they're going to be, what's the committee thinking. That's the reason they have it. Bill, thank you. Like your point about the details. Appreciate it. Ulissa, welcome in. Tell folks what you want to ask about this.
Oh, hi. This is my first time.
Thank you for joining.
Hi. So yeah, I wanted to ask sort of around the Politico Pro question. I have a friend who is liberal, a couple who is liberal, and they are losing their minds about all of the headlines, political, Gaza, you name it. How do I help my friend cope?
Dan.
So in the bigger picture, I think part of the challenge for the Democratic Party is we're powerless. And there is just this feeling of, one, we can't stop it. Two, they don't know who would even stand up and be the one to, lead the charge. Chuck Schumer dancing with an avocado and beer did not give a lot of inspiration to a lot of people. And then they don't know what we're for. So it feels like a steamroller is rolling over everyone. I think what I would say is, historically, when a party is out of power in all three, House, Senate, White House, the first few months can feel like shock and awe. Not to this scale. This is daily, hourly, every few minutes.
Yes.
But in 2009, Republicans felt like they were on their back foot at least those first few months. You know, Obama was Theodore Roosevelt, like he was the next coming of a great realignment. He had won, you know, a true massive landslide. So it feels overwhelming. I think the good news for the party, and Mark alluded to this in the opening, there is energy reemerging. Like, people are protesting. Okay, it's a little crazy what they're saying, but you know, so was Let's Go Brandon and, you know, the F Joe Biden chants that broke out in the summer of 21. You know, they were crude, but there was energy. Like, people were getting fired up, and Trump was out there stoking it. Good politics. The party will get the rest of this together, but you can't fight nothing. Something is better than nothing. And they are starting to like enter the field with some energy.
Ulissa, thank you. Very much appreciate it. Let's bring in Ray Marcano, who's a journalist in Ohio, who's going to tell us smart things about this. Ray.
Well, Mark, I've just got a couple of comments. One, the Politico Pro story is a non-story. I mean, I'm sorry, it's $44,000 from USAID, which we've already identified. What this is a continuation of Trump being able to masterfully manipulate people so that it stokes his base and it puts Democrats on the defensive. Look at what he's going after, right? He's going after the journalists in Politico Pro. The right can't stand journalists. He's going after immigrants. Right can't stand immigrants. Actually, everybody wants fair immigration policy and people who aren't criminals out of the country. He's also going after, which I find very interesting, trans women, because that also stokes his base. Notice, however, he's not at all talked about trans men, which actually statistically are more than trans women. Why aren't they doing that? Because we have to keep men out of the locker room doesn't work if you're talking about trans men. A man who became a woman is far more threatening to people than a woman who became a man. So, folks, all of this stuff is just meant to manipulate the body politic so they can continue to talk about what he wants to talk about in a way that riles them up, but doesn't get any closer to any solutions.
Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't fully think it's like that, that he's just trying to rile. Like, I think he's trying to win the daily headline. He's trying to continue to show momentum. Like, he's cleaning up the system. And to your point, Ray, he's finding easy targets. There are a lot if you comb through the federal government, which is what they're doing with AI and with individuals. And it does stoke the base. But the flip side to it is Democrats aren't going to fall on the sword for Politico, right? They're not going to fall on the sword. They don't know what to say on the transgender issue at all. The party, even the AOCs of the world, don't really know how they want to talk about this. And then obviously immigration, to state the obvious, totally splits the party. So I hate to say this as a Democrat, it's really smart politics what he's doing. And it's really, really smart. And because every day there's a new target, you just feel like you can't get your sea legs and your bearings. And that is what's demoralizing. And that's a strategy. I mean, it's a smart strategy.
All right, Ray, thank you. Leslie, welcome in. Question about or
Hi.
comments about Politico.
You know, I think it lends towards what we see, I don't know, down here, I guess, as part of the bubble that everyday people can't pierce. And so, but everyone seems to have in their lives this person that is absolutely unhinged and has been since about 2016. And so you relate to these people in your life, and then you see what's happening in DC. And so that pro-political story, oh, here's this information that people in the bubble get. And yet, you know, they kind of ignore the fact that people, you know, my small town in East Texas is dealing with, and I'm not there at the moment, so I live in Sydney about part-time. So, but they're dealing with, school vouchers. And, Governor Abbott showed up in their small town at the private school. That was that was played across all the national news. But you see these people in these small towns, and they actually can do their jobs. And what really is so frustrating is all of the regulation that just seems so expensive and just another hoop that you have to jump through that does nothing, but requires you hire somebody to check a box.
Leslie,
And yet
Leslie, go ahead. All right, Leslie,
so anyway, I think.
Go ahead.
So I think that's part of the issue here is people in small towns that they have the information there to do their jobs, and all of the what's happening in Washington D.C. just seems to be in the way.
Yeah, and if you own a small business in your town, you're not allowed to spend millions of dollars of taxpayer money to get better information.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point, Leslie. And you speak for millions when you make it, Dan.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you started by saying DC is a bubble. It 100% is. And you can even shrink that bubble to like a 1.5 mile radius, something called K Street and kind of Georgetown swinging up to Capitol Hill. Look, one of the things that's probably key for people to understand here is members of Congress do not talk to each other much. Literally, not just the majority to the minority, within the majority, within the minority. The number of congressional staff and members of Congress who learn what is happening on a daily basis through Politico Pro is astronomical. They just don't talk very much. And so it is a problem. Leslie, I used to fly to Kansas City, Missouri every other week to spend 3 or 4 days. And it was great because when I got out of there, it reminded me what's really on their mind and the number of things that I would think everyone must be talking about when I got to headquarters, and people had no idea because they're focused on their community, on their job, and so much of this is noise that they can't relate to and they don't want to.
Leslie, thank you for coming in.
Right.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, I'm going to switch gears now. Anybody can raise their hand about anything, including about AI, which we're going to talk about with our next guest. James McGuire has waited patiently. I don't know if he's a subscriber to Politico Pro or not. I guess
I've read Politico quite a bit, but not Politico Pro.
Okay, James, really grateful for you to make time to join us. Tell folks about your career and where you've gotten your expertise in terms of AI.
Sure. So I've just finished a 5-year stint as editor-in-chief of a publication called eWeek. It's a trade publication covering the technology world. Over the years, we've covered data, AI, and cloud. I ran the coverage, and we covered those 3 subjects. When ChatGPT came out in November of 22, everything changed. Like all the oxygen got sucked out of the room. So I pivoted the coverage to be exclusively AI. So the last couple of years, I've been basically shoulder deep in AI coverage. So that is my claim to expertise, if I have one.
Okay. And you and I have been communicating about your perspective on things. I'd love for you to start with the topical question of
yes,
how should and how could DOGE be using AI to investigate government spending?
Right. I mean, at first glance, I mean, the Elon Musk and DOGE news is pretty horrifying in terms of AI. I mean, there's no doubt that AI should be used in the federal government and that government systems need to be modernized. But AI needs to be used with a sense of care and nuance that I'm not sure he's using. I'm not even sure he's capable of. But let's talk about AI itself. So AI is powerful, but it's not magical. The problem is this. Artificial intelligence is brilliantly smart. It's got this intellectual firepower, but it's not human. It cannot make nuanced moral judgments. Artificial intelligence cannot, at this point, really make advanced managerial decisions. So far, that still requires a human. I'm not sure that Elon Musk can, with very little oversight, use AI to reshape the federal government for the better. It's pretty worrying. If you look what he did with Twitter, he bought it. It was a vibrant platform. And then now it's pretty messed up, and he wants to reshape the federal government. Let me give you a personal example. I'm writing a novel, and I submitted the first chapter to ChatGPT. I just entered it right in. About 10 seconds later, Chat came back with these great comments, like it knew all the characters, and AI had understood the motivations, and I thought, wow, this is amazing. And then I sent it off to my actual human writing teacher I've worked with a long time. She's really an expert in drama and characters, and she said, you know, this part really isn't clear, and this part could be streamlined, and this character really needs to be deepened. And I realized she was right. She actually understood the material, where ChatGPT seemed to understand the material, but the human really did understand it. And that's my worry about Elon, is like, does he really know what he's doing as he mucks around with these very complicated issues?
How would you describe the difference between the two parties in terms of their attitude towards the role of government in connecting with the private sector and AI?
Well, I mean, I think it's the classic Democrat-Republican divide. It came out in Biden's executive order. I mean, Biden's executive order was well-intentioned, but it was too intrusive in reality. I mean, it was kind of a problem. The Republican, stance by comparison is way too hands-off. I mean, Biden wrote an executive order that did some really good things. It wanted to combat bias in AI. It wanted to protect confidentiality. On the other hand, it had this really kooky provision that said that companies were supposed to submit regular reports about the AI models as they were building them. So, I mean, that is insanely intrusive. It was never going to really happen. Companies would never really submit a regular report about the products they're building. It just makes no sense. On the other hand, Trump, basically his second day in office, rescinded Biden's executive order about AI and has put nothing in its place. So it's really a free-for-all at this point. There's no major federal legislation that really comprehensively covers AI in the US. And Trump is not making any noises about that after eliminating the one little executive order that did. So the question is, hey, these big, strong, powerful companies are very sophisticated. We need some regulation. Donald Trump, I know you want to be really pro-business and pro-AI, but what about us citizens? That's what I would ask.
In the short term, what are the dangers of that hands-off policy?
Well, these companies really know what they're doing in terms of harvesting our information and using it for their own profitable, uses. And so, will they steal our data? They will indeed steal our data. Will they use systems and algorithms to manipulate us in many different ways? There's no doubt about it. Maybe they'll influence healthcare policy the way that's written. AI is reshaping so many different industries: healthcare, education, retail. We don't actually even know the many ways that they can, use AI for their own profit that is not really helpful to us. So, AI does need to be regulated. It's a super complex issue. The question is how, and that is a really difficult question. But the idea that it would be completely unregulated is, I think, a pretty serious problem.
Dan.
Is there any country in the world that you think is getting that balance right of regulating?
Well, and that's another issue. I mean, Europe has made some, tentative things in terms of a privacy policy, but the problem is the technology is really fast moving and very sophisticated, and governments are very slow moving and tend to be, inept in these very forward looking issues. So the answer really is no. I wish the answer was yes, but it's really no one has done that. I mean, Biden's executive order, as weak-toothed as it was a nice first step, but it's something we need to go a lot further with.
Yeah. Do you feel like Biden obviously has exited the stage? Is there anyone in Congress that you see is a thoughtful leader on this that maybe might, fill in the gaps where Trump is not focused right now? Right.
All the headlines I've seen, I've never seen anyone be identified as, oh yeah, that's the person who really knows AI. That person has not yet emerged.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, people like Mark Warner and some folks who came out of the technology industry have been talking about it.
Right.
But it's interesting that you feel like there is no one that jumps out to you.
I wonder if one of the reasons that is true is that the technology companies were at first slow to lobbying, and now they spend a lot with lobbying efforts. And I'm sure they do a lot of lobbying with both parties. Maybe there's been some palms being greased, and there's no big hurry to regulate it. Or in fairness, it is such a complex issue that, it's going to be slow. They're going to have to feel their way.
David Sachs is a very smart guy and has been given a ton of authority by Donald Trump in dealing with these issues as well as crypto. What do you know about him and how well equipped he is to protect the public interest?
Yeah, I mean, what I hear from him, he seems like he's a complete cheerleader for Donald Trump, and he's very, very aggressively pro AI, which is not going to lead us towards regulation. So He seems to be a figurehead that is very in favor of the industry, is very pro-business. I'm concerned about the citizens, because the business, I mean, those large tech companies know how to take care of themselves. It's the consumers that I'm worried about. And the things I've heard from him have been just very pro-business, very pro-AI company, not really talking about regulation so far, at least.
Last question, then we'll open it up to the community.
Mm-hmm.
We talked on this platform about this Chinese company that came forward with what they said was a more inexpensively produced capability. And there's debate amongst both amateurs and professionals about how much that suggested, if at all, that China had some sort of leg up. What's your view on that example, and in general, where the United States stands vis-a-vis China and other countries in developing the best technology?
Right. I mean, there's no doubt that, you know, the U.S. has been the big dog, really the leading player on the planet. I mean, there's been no major European competitors. The Chinese companies have been second and third tier. You know, DeepSeek, as you mentioned, has challenged the big tech companies. I think in reality, though, DeepSeek in China is not in position to upset American AI dominance. There's several different reasons for that, but one is, I mean, DeepSeek is open source, which means it can be easily replicated. It's cheaper, which is an achievement, but it will be replicated. There's nothing stopping a group of talented PhD students from copying another DeepSeek, and you know they would need to raise, say, $5 to $10 million, but that's not big money in tech. At this moment, I'm sure there are teams all over the world doing just that, and a lot of these teams will be American, and they'll be funded by venture capital. So I think that, you know, AI will be really strong in America and will continue to top the world. Even the mega cap US tech companies, which do seem a little humiliated by DeepSeek, are in no danger of losing their global dominance anytime soon. I mean, they've got some big entrenched advantages. You know, Amazon has over 100 data centers in 20 plus countries. Microsoft has over 300 data centers all over the world. So I think that, you know, U.S. exceptionalism based on AI will remain strong for the foreseeable future.
Okay, amazing, James. Thank you. Let's bring folks in. Ask about. Hopefully, we'll have some AI questions, but you can ask about whatever you want, including more on Politico Pro, my favorite topic. But would love some AI questions if you've got them. Ronald, welcome in. Tell folks where you are, what's on your mind.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Well, my technical background is an actuary. My professional background was I ran a team of healthcare and health insurance consultants at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I wanted to give an idea to Dan and to throw out a comment made by Senator Fetterman today. Senator Fetterman said a lot of pitches going to go over the plate, and he's waiting for a strike before he hits it. And he didn't think that USAID or any of this Politico Pro is in the strike zone that he'd want to swing at. Second thing, I want to try to connect the AI, the Politico Pro, and the USAID. And that is that Musk also commented today, apparently, I heard this on some of the channels, that the big area is not USAID, but it's Medicare. Now, I know in this program, even people have talked about that you can't go into the sacred cows of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. But my consulting background and my health insurance background tells me that the amount of fraud and payments that go on in Medicare doesn't affect benefits, but there's tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud because we have a business model in both Medicare and Medicaid that is called pay and chase. In other words, we pay out the bills to hospitals and doctors, and I think there's even a government accounting office study that has shown the biggest area of organized crime is putting in false claims, where you have 3 colonoscopies on the same person in the same day. And this is where I think Democrats probably have an edge because of the public perception and not understanding the amount of fraud that's going on, that unless Republicans are able to frame this properly, that organized crime is stealing money from our treasury because we just pay and chase, and then they're gone when we go to chase them, that the Republicans don't frame this. This is going to be a strike over the Democrats' health care expertise and edge over the many years. So I think that's where we're going to hear a lot of screaming from the Democrats. But the reality is there are hundreds of millions of dollars of fraudulent payments going to organized crime and other inappropriate. So let's connect the AI for a second, and then let you guys comment on it. The AI, very simply, without getting into the sophisticated AI, just take the fact that any of you who have credit cards, if somebody tries to make a false claim on your credit card, then you immediately are notified. You know, are you making this purchase, and respond back yes or no, and you can find out. So why aren't we using MasterCard, Visa, American Express technology, which is pretty basic AI, I would assume, to find out where the fraud is in these government programs, which is enormous, in my opinion, from my experience.
Ronald, thank you. Great question. James, as he said, they have credit card companies have used a version of this, but we all know it's fallible. All AI is, but this seems pretty unsophisticated compared to what we're led to believe is where we're headed. So what are your thoughts on Ronald's?
Yeah, I think Ronald makes a really good point. I would draw a distinction between enforcement versus reshaping. Like, I think it's really correct. He's really right. Use AI to enforce the current regulations. Let's do that. If someone is having 3 colonoscopies in the same day, let's strike against that. And that's just a sort of a simple enforcement issue where the AI model can cycle through millions and millions of transactions and find that. That's a great use of it. That's different from really reshaping the system without oversight. I like enforcement. If someone's going to actually muck around the system and really like make some valid people get cut off the system, that's a problem, and I don't want to be doing that. So enforcement, good. Reshaping the system willy-nilly is bad.
Exactly.
Dan.
I agree with John Fetterman. I don't think any of these issues have been worthy of, taking a swing with the bat if you're a Democrat. I think we were wise. Supposedly the Veterans Affairs Department is the next one that Musk is really zeroing in on, along with Medicare and Medicaid. Ronald, I agree with you. Where there is common sense efficiencies and things like fraud to be rooted out, I can't fathom Democrats would say we support fraud. Don't touch that. Just like I said this morning, I think Democrats ought to talk about looking at the Department of Defense, one of the most inefficient spenders of money on procurement projects. And so I think that's where Musk can be good. What DOGE is doing is good, looking for fraud and looking for ways to be more efficient and do more with less.
So, Dan, do you think that the Democrats then will accept that kind of going after fraud in Medicare and Medicaid as opposed to politicizing it? I mean, look how crazy they're going now with just some of these crazy areas of expenditure that have been turned up from USAID, and I'm sure there will be more of that. And as I say that, one more thing. It seemed to me and this as speaking from a Republican standpoint, it seemed to me that back in the 1990s, I'm old enough to remember Bill Clinton and far before that the Republicans complained in the 1990s that he was stealing Republican talking points and accepting Republican positions that gave Democrats more of a reason to come back to the Democratic Party. And that's why he was able to beat, George H.W. Bush after only one term. So is this an area where Democrats can sort of link all that, go against fraud, adopt some of the Republican ideas, and bring Democrats back to the party saying, okay, they've now got some common sense? I know you need a spokesperson for that. And the only one I know of as a Republican looking at the scan is the governor of Kentucky. Seems pretty reasonable to me, but there may be others that surface.
Yeah, I think, look, politics, if someone has a good idea, take it. I mean, Trump does it himself. I think where the problem for Democrats in terms of what you're talking about with embracing DOGE is, when it was first launched, they talked about trying to find inefficiencies. So if you say USAID spent some money on some things that were not good, let's say, the way Carolyn Levitt did the other day, I think Democrats would have said, yeah, okay, yeah, that's terrible, like, good for you. But to take that little teeny weeny slice and say we're going to eliminate the entire thing, everyone's getting laid off, and we're going to fold the thing into the State Department with no real kind of sense of what that means, it doesn't feel like it's thoughtful and sophisticated. It feels like it's just a machine gun spraying out, and just whatever it hits, they'll do. And that's where they're losing any sense that why would Democrats want to work with them? if all you're doing is looking for the little molehill to blow the whole mountain up.
Doesn't it seem like that the USAID ought to be coordinating at least, if not under the State Department?
Sure. I mean, of course. I mean, look, half the committees of jurisdiction on Capitol Hill have overlap. Like the HHS Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy, had to go through the Health Committee, the Health and Education Committee, and the Finance Committee. Shouldn't there only be one committee that oversees that? But there isn't. We have an Armed Services and an Intelligence Committee. There's 17 intelligence committees in the US government to begin with, right? We have the CIA, the National Intelligence Director. Like, our government is messy. And that is where, if you're thoughtful, there is some good to be done. But what I think people are beginning to think is that's not Musk's endgame.
Ronald, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ronald. Put your hand down unless you've got an AI question. I want to get one more AI question in. So if you've got an AI question, all right, Brian has an AI question. Brian, come on in. Tell folks who don't know where you are and what's in your mind.
Hey, guys. I'm in the rightful home of the Space Force in Huntsville, Alabama. Thanks for having me back on.
Yes, sir.
I was curious to talk to James about AI. I guess one of my biggest concerns with what I see with Musk and Saxon government today is the fact that they haven't really divested from significant business interests in the same domain they're now setting government policy for. What are your thoughts on that, and what would divestiture or regulation in that realm look like?
You know, it's really a worry. It's like Musk has all these business interests that are involved with AI. He's got his own AI company. Is that the AI that he's using to redo the government? We're not sure. So it's like he seems like he's a walking conflict of interest. So it's like we need to know what his possible profit routes are, and what is the source of the artificial intelligence, and I think it's a major problem.
Okay, thank you for the question. I'll sneak one more in real quick. Anne, come on in. AI question. Go ahead, unmute and ask away.
Thank you. I just wanted to inform people. First of all, I love your program. It's wonderful. And I try and listen as often as possible. Back during Trump 1.0, I had a client. They're actually in North Bethesda, Maryland. And there was their second government contract. Alex Azar was the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He wanted to try and get control of his spend. They were spending at that time $22.5 billion in goods and services. And so this company, which is a AI tech company, put all of the goods and services into what is known as a data lake, which every department needs to have happen. That needs to be done in every single department. And on the pilot program, which was 7 months long and only 10 product lines, we saved $360 million. And a lot of it was because, for example, the department had purchased a license for Adobe Acrobat. Nobody knew it. So until everything was transparent, they were all buying multiple licenses. And so, there's just tons of, then we had a project over at the Coast Guard. They wanted to get control of their energy and food spend. They had tens of millions of dollars in savings. And for the people, and then, we went over to DOD and, the administration sort of ended and the Biden administration didn't pursue the use of these technology tools. That same company now has developed a system that can easily re-platform. It is state of the art. There's nothing like it on the market today. It's the most advanced. It also has what they call level 7 security clearance, which is the highest security clearance that's accredited by the government. And with this new iteration, they can re-platform the government platforms to actually be very, very efficient, really look at all the spend, et cetera. So I look at this and I think the use of these technology tools to really all of government spending, evaluate programs, et cetera, down to the penny. And a lot of the grants they're seeing are, 40 to 60% of the money is going to one person and the other remainder is going to the project. So you get into this, and I just think there's a lot of ways to achieve efficiencies and save a lot of money.
And thank you. Thanks.
Results.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, I would get back to the idea of oversight and accountability. So that company did some wonderful things, and who was really running the company, and who are the individuals accountable to? And so, who is overseeing Elon Musk as he makes these big changes? Do we know what he's doing? Is this transparent? It's our government. Shouldn't we really know what he's doing? And who is actually overseeing Elon Musk? I'm sure there were actually oversight and managers in the company that you mentioned. And I mean, it's true. AI can do some wonderful things, and we should be using it more in the federal government. I just worry about Elon Musk, and he might be a loose cannon.
Oh, sorry.
If you look,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
okay, if you look at their technologists that they've brought in, they're brilliant young men, and they're using a lot of the technology tools that I'm talking about to basically do the audits.
Yeah, but they're said to be brilliant, but they need accountability. They need accountability.
Oh, that's absolutely. There's no.
So I'm a
I
little
don't
worried.
think
I'm a little
anybody's
worried.
questioned
I'm,
it. Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah.
If they have no accountability and they're brilliant, I'm not sure that's a great combination.
Well, I don't.
Yeah. All right. It's the top of the hour, so we got to stop.
you.
And thank you for coming. Great to see you again. James, really appreciate you coming in and sharing your expertise with us, and we hope you'll come back.
Thank you, Mark. It was great.
Okay. And Dan, thanks for making time. Dan and I will be back in 12 hours for the morning meeting, 9 a.m. Eastern time. We'll see you then. Tomorrow night on two-way tonight at the regular time back at 6 Eastern. Noah, remind me who our guest is. Richie Torres.
Is it Richie Torres?
Congressman Richie Torres of New York, who's been here before and is a great explainer of where the Democratic Party stands from his point of view, will be our guest. So join us then. But again, first up, tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern time for the morning meeting, Dan, Sean, and I. Thanks again to James, to Dan, to everybody who asked questions. Have a great night. See you in 12 hours.